Exceptional Radio. Wow, that was random. Exceptional Radio.
Man, I really got to do something about the intro music. So I've been looking at guitars a lot lately, and I've noticed that there's this just flooded market situation going. Like
That's hilarious.
I mean, I know that there are, tons of instruments being made in China and Indonesia and Korea and Japan and Mexico and United States and all over Europe. And, I realize that there are a lot of places where these things are being manufactured. But like when I was in high school, I remember this brand Kona emerged, and they made these guitars in Texas, and they were pretty decent quality and they were affordable. And the other day I see one of these things on Walmart through D-Lig, a website I like to frequent because people share like cool deals on the internet and stuff like that. And it was like $117, free shipping. Like a full size or a cutaway acoustic electric guitar, $120.
I happened to do a lot of research on this a month ago, or almost 2 months ago now, because one day I decided I need a bass guitar. And so I was like doing a bunch of research, and what happened is right around COVID, a bunch of people decided that they were going to get back into guitar playing or get into it for the first time.
Sure.
Like in 2019. And so the market spiked, and the producers started trying to keep up with this, and it kept up for like 3 years basically. So up until like 2022, the market kept adding more buyers, and so they kept producing more and more guitars. So it's kind of like a comic book situation where if you got a really, really nice guitar that isn't mass produced, it probably went up in value, whereas the mass produced ones have gone down in value. So it's like you're saying, the ones that were really nice, 3 or 4 years ago, and would be not even necessarily out of the price range, but something you couldn't just go and be like, okay, I'm going to just buy this because I feel like it. Now that's in this price range where, especially if you buy a used one, you're going to be able to pick up a lot more for your money than you were 4 years ago. And it's really a buyer's market.
Oh yeah. Oh, it's incredible because there have always been certain manufacturers that I preferenced, and I'm very familiar with their offerings. But every so often I'll get some inspiration because I'll see some performance and someone's using some instrument that's like, what the heck is that? I don't recognize the headstock, or that's an oddball shape. I want to go learn more. And then, next thing I know, I'm down some rabbit hole looking at guitars again because it's fun. But man, there are so many brands, and a lot of them look like they're all coming out of the same factory in Indonesia or Korea. But it's like,
well,
it's really subtle.
Something.
It's really subtle things. Like they might all have the same like basic everything, except for there's tiny details like the knobs or the tuner heads, or the bridge is a slightly different variation for an entire brand, and it's really crazy. Like, and I know that they're like, the big boys like Fender, they own Fender and Charvel and Jackson and
Squire, is it?
Yeah, Squire, and Gretsch is part of that family, and EVH. There's a whole there's like in Gibson it has their own, family of instruments that they own and maintain the legacies of. There are so many of these, really well spec'd instruments that are either like, I've never heard of them. They're probably punching way above their weight. But as you said, like some brands, like their value just it comic booked, and then others were just like, we don't know. They haven't been around long enough to know. Are they even going to exist in a few years?
Well, and another thing you nailed upon is the factories being located in different countries. And so this is one of the other things that I've seen in my research is like you might get the same model guitar, but there's going to be some manufactured in China, some manufactured in Indonesia, and some manufactured in Korea. And they're all going to have the same parts, but the quality control is going to vary wildly. So that's where like um we were looking at an Ibanez, and it the parts, you could tell the parts were like, what they said, but it just wasn't put together in a way that produced a good quality sound. And that's where I'm like, for somebody who's entry level and isn't going to be able to tell the difference in the timbre, like they they wouldn't know. But even though I hadn't played bass, it was like this just isn't gonna be worth $200. And even I think on sale it was like 180 something. So it was like at that point it was totally worth it to just go the extra $150 and get a Fender. But in that, if I was less trying to make it happen that day, I could have found like an equivalent Squire or something for $100 less. But I didn't. Sometimes you don't. It just depends on what
Yeah, do you feel
it's
like waiting,
for.
or do you want it right now?
Right,
And
exactly.
is it really, do you really have to wait? No.
And a lot of times, that that waiting period is gonna be the difference in cost. And it's like if you want it now and you need the instant gratification, you can pay for it. And I think that is the difference between like trying to make something happen, or it's not always like um an impulse that hasn't been thought about, because that day it was like it seemed impulsive, but I'd been thinking about it for a while. And so in doing all that research, it was like the research pushed me towards the Ibanez, but once I got to Guitar Center and was able to play it, it was like, nah, the all of the things on paper can't compare to just strumming it once. And
Yeah.
so
I mean,
like
I actually really like Ibanez electric basses, but really only the SR series. They make they make a few other series that are like that I've known people who really liked, but there's only like the one iteration, the neck profile of the SR series that I really gravitated towards. And this it's strange. It's the same thing with their guitars. Like they have a ton of electric guitars, and the only ones I really like are the RGs.
have you seen the Tim Henson?
The electric or his acoustic guitar.
I mean, I guess
He has
this
one
one
that's like
is
it has like nylon strings.
acoustic.
It's like an
Yeah,
acoustic electric flamenco
it's
guitar.
acoustic electric. Yeah,
Yeah, that thing's really sweet looking.
that's Ibanez. That's
Yeah,
why I had asked, and that's where I'm
yeah.
like,
He also has an electric guitar that's also very nice, like very very nice. That dude is incredible, like
yeah.
absolutely freaking mind blowing incredible.
It's funny to see how he divides the guitar world. And I don't even think it's necessarily just him, but so much as like fast playing. and I can
Well,
understand
he's
where
very
some people are
lyrical.
coming
He's
from. Oh,
extremely
for
lyrical.
sure.
He's like way more lyrical than almost any of his peers. And I think the thing that's really interesting about a lot of it is that if you listen to like Polyphia's music for a great length and on repeat, you'll see that there's a lot of like pop themes that keep getting recycled. And it's really interesting because for the longest time guitar music has always been like, metal is all about the expression of, the guitar player being like, yeah, I'm going to do the most intense thing I can come up with. And rock and roll itself has always been, the glorification of itself essentially. But this this pop music that's happening, this pop guitar virtuosity, it's really incredible. Like just absolutely incredible stuff. Um, there's another guy. His name's like Cheat. Yeah, Ichida Nico, and he's another like phenomenal guitar player. I'm not even sure how to describe the music he makes other than just like divine guitar music. And his name is spelled like Ichika Nito. He's another Ibanez artist. Um,
So I think Tim Henson playing on his own in the same way that like Jaco Pastorius on his own is like not the same as Polyphia as an ensemble.
yeah.
And like you're saying, when it's an ensemble, there's a lot of pop elements that can go with the lyrical guitar, and like altogether, it's something beyond just the technical exploration of the strings. And I think that's where if you just if you just focus on the guitar, or if it's only him playing, it's I would imagine it'd be hard to listen to one track more than once. Um,
Oh, I mean, for like in terms of technical analysis or theoretical analysis or trying to understand like where is this movement coming from? Like what like how does this and it's funny actually. I just watched a video where he was talking about writing a song using like an auto chord, a programmable auto chord generator, and he said he was just trying to go for something that sounded like some classical music, some chords that sounded like classical music, but fit over a pop music chord progression, a pop friendly chord progression. It was really interesting. Like I, I can't. I don't know if I can find it now. I gotta go turn something
it
on. It's
reminds
humming.
it reminds me of Qbert and Blockhead, because on the one hand, it's like Qbert is an amazing producer and DJ, but I couldn't name a Qbert, like I couldn't think of a Qbert song, or like come up with a Qbert melody if somebody held a gun to my head. Um, that's not true for somebody like Goldie or LTJ Bukem, or you know, it'd be years before, like I haven't heard a Goldie song in years, but it'd be years before I forgot what a Goldie melody or Goldie song sounded like. I I can't say that for Qbert. And then on that same note, because Tim Henson's playing is so technically complicated, it's like really hard to latch on to a melody to memorize as a
Oh yeah,
listener.
oh yeah. Polyphia is definitely like music for musicians. It's got
I
a
mean, but even
very
as a
high threshold.
musician,
It's got a
you know what I'm
really
saying?
high threshold, like super high threshold. I don't think it's definitely not for the uninitiated. Um, one would have to be like extremely into or interested in the guitar to want to like try and consume that kind of music all the time. I consume music like that all the time, but I'm also like, I don't know, I'm like 30 years into chasing that bolt of lightning, trying to climb up a mountain. It's
And okay, let me reframe that in that I'm not saying people like you aren't listening to it or
no, I'm
like
saying that I'm an outlier, like
pursuing it,
that like outside
but
of professional musicians who listen to music like that just for the sole purpose of like, exploring technical expression. I don't think that this is the kind of thing that normal people will listen to.
even beyond that, I'm saying okay, there'll be times I'm sure where you're driving around in your truck and your radio's not on and you're either humming or there's music playing in your head.
Yeah.
And Polyphia is probably not gonna be
No.
what like you how are you gonna hum Polyphia? You know what I mean? How can you is such a thing even possible where I'm like that's what I'm talking about in terms of like the accessibility
Yeah. No,
of a Polyphia
it'd be
song in terms of like
it's just as absurd as trying to sing the melody to some dubstep, some modern dubstep.
right exactly and
Like
that's why when you're driving around and your radio's not on you're not thinking about Casper and Rusco either because that would just be equally as ridiculous like
bow, like all
it's
over the
easier
place.
well and in terms of like shit that it's easier for one's brain to access or to start to hum along to it's going to be like very simple melodies very simple harmonies like those are the things that are baseline not
So
BASS BASE
before I've had a sufficient amount of caffeine, most of the my head radio is playing pretty neutral or serene sounding, like guitar music. Sometimes I hear synthesizers. Sometimes it's like it almost verges on like some kind of near ambient kind of sound in my mind. But once I've had plenty of caffeine, I start hearing this really weird, and it's only been for the last 6 months. I hear this really strange kind of Steely Dan Jamiroquai thing, like almost, I mean, most of the day, unless I start listening to something else. But if I'm just like, nothing playing in the background, not actively having anything on to keep track of time, I start hearing this like kind of dark Steely Dan type words in the back of my head to a Jamiroquai backdrop. But it's all like cats that are detectives or secret agents or double agents. Sometimes Bruce is a robot. I think a lot of those I've been trying to watch um, like more crime drama, more detective type stories. I watched this movie the other night called Greedy People, and it's like a dark comedy of errors where everyone just makes the wrong decision, and almost everyone dies in the end. And it's kind of like it's not like a train wreck. It's like a slow burn of mistakes where the whole time just oh no, don't do that, no, stop, don't do that, but they keep doing it. And then of course there's like the local like police chief who actually is trying to figure out what's going on.
you say it's British
Oh no, it's got like Joseph Gordon-Levitt in it. It's called Greedy People.
oh
I don't even know what I'm not sure where it's available.
Yeah, this is the first I'm hearing of it.
Man, it's funny. Like, okay, it's available on like Google Play and Apple TV and Fandango and Amazon Prime and YouTube, and so it looks like it's available along the normal cohorts. And obviously, I didn't watch it on any of those because I didn't look for it. No, it's one of those movies that it's refreshing because the only effects are practical effects. There's no CGI. It's all dialogue and acting. And for a while, like, I forget that, you know, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who we've essentially watched grow up on screen and turn into a whole adult in like an action movie actor too. Like, I forgot it was him for a while because he did a really good job of being like a small town police officer. Like a surprisingly convincing job.
Oh yeah, he's got range.
He's
Um,
incredible.
I feel like he he's like a more or a Shia LaBeouf that's not crazy. Because Shia LaBeouf has range, but he's also a crazy person and a narcissist.
I think
And it seems like Joseph Gordon-Levitt is not. He's like all of the good qualities of Shia LaBeouf and none of the bad, based on not having any problematic reports off screen.
but he can handle like Bruce Willis level action movies.
Oh yeah, oh
He's
yeah.
incredible. He's like,
I mean, he was in Inception, right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he's
And I mean, fucking Batman. Um,
yeah,
I'm still pissed that they didn't give him Robin, like,
they should
or
have.
like Batman Beyond or whatever, and start a new or whether it's continue that series or start a
Man,
new one with it with
man,
where they left off.
Joseph Gordon-Levitt is in
Or
Batman
Nightwing.
Beyond as
Nightwing, shit.
Nightwing or Batman Beyond. That would be really awesome.
It's not too late
It
either.
isn't. It really isn't. Oh man, yeah, Nightwing would be a really good one for him.
Right. I feel like Nightwing would be better because then he wouldn't have to like do the MCU juice diet, even though it's DC, obviously. Nightwing can, and what's funny is people were like hating on Robert Pattinson for not wanting to like take steroids, but that was probably the smartest thing he's ever done. Is just refuse to like get all roided out to play Batman.
I think
Um,
okay, so my initial reaction to the Batman was this is like as dark as it has been ever, I think. It was a pretty hard version of Batman. And the thing that I liked about it is the characters didn't look like they were always like at the gym when they weren't, you know, villaining or cape crusading. Like, cuz who has time to go to the gym when does Batman actually have time to work out other than when he's already kicking people's asses? When does anybody have time to go to the gym when they're like in Batman's sphere? Seriously. If you're like within proximity of if you're like 2 degrees separated from Batman, your life is so, I mean, just outright crazy just by proximity. I don't think anybody within like 2 degrees of Batman's sphere has any time to go to the gym, let alone do anything normal. They might pretend to do normal shit, but they're always afraid that, you know, something's going to explode at the mall that they have to go to pick up one thing, or their car's going to explode. And the same,
well, those are the people who assume or who know,
yeah, they know something's going to happen. They just don't know
or
when.
who I mean, who know he's Batman.
That's what I mean. Like,
Like
yeah,
there's,
they know Batman is Bruce, and vice versa. That's what I mean.
which is
Like,
basically only the Bat family, and they're all, um, like Alfred's former military, fucking, I think everybody in his proximity at least has some training. Like I don't know. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's anybody who knows he's Batman and is not trained.
Yeah.
Um,
But that's it exactly. Like,
because Gordon is even former military,
yeah.
so he has like um police and military training.
Oh yeah, no. Everyone, anyone who gets that close has extensive training. But even the people that only know Bruce or only interact with Batman, they're also at risk, even if they don't know the
So,
other identity.
did you see any Pennyworth?
Oh, that's the Alfred exploration.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But they also bring in fucking Thomas Wayne as a character, and he's basically CIA. Um,
Yeah. Why else would the Batcave exist?
well, this is it takes place in England, so we don't even really
Huh.
see Gotham City at all.
I'm
It's like
sure
all
that
I
he had
think
his
it's
own
exclusively
Batcave.
right, but this is like we meet Thomas's sister, I forget her name. So this is basically establishing how much of a badass Alfred is, but also just bringing Thomas in as like a tertiary character, and then their plot line revolves around Aleister Crowley. So they like tie in real world people ever so often at certain plot points. Um, but it's like Alfred's basically trying to stop. I think they're the Ravens. I think that is what they're called from taking over the British government. That's the like grand scheme that's happening in this plot line. But it's like it's really dark, and so it's like the I want to say the darkest iteration of any Batman related story we've seen yet. Um, but it's flown under the radar so much just because it was on Peacock that I don't even know how many people are aware it existed, let alone watched it. But it's once you accept Alfred as the badass that they're trying to make him, then it's like, oh shit, this really adds an entirely different layer of Alfred being there. Where ever so often in the modern stories, you'll see Alfred get involved, whether he's like remotely piloting something or like somebody comes and attacks at the bat cave and Alfred has to defend. And it's like seeing him as an old man, it's not impossible to believe, but you're like, this feels like kind of a stretch. But when you see Pennyworth, then it's like, oh, okay, I get it now. Um, but that's where it just does a really good job of adding a layer to the mythos instead of just feeling like franchise exploitation. And I think that's why I'm surprised it didn't catch on more. But you know, knowing these audiences is, I guess, is really not like I'm also not surprised that it didn't catch on because they're not really um primed for new stories. This nostalgia addiction is keeping people in the same five stories over and over perpetually to the point where it's like I wouldn't even be surprised if they relaunched the Infinity Saga just because all these people are like,
Well, they're going to have to because they have to include the version that has all of the X-Men universe characters that
right,
weren't there for
yeah.
round one that should have been there for round one because it's the Infinity Wars. It had everyone, all hands on
Yeah.
deck. Cyclops should have been whooping some ass. Wolverine should have been going fisticuffs with Thanos. Like that's how that stuff actually works. So of course we're gonna get like 3 or 4 more iterations of Infinity Gauntlet. I'm afraid. Like before you or I just stop watching comic book based movies altogether, and I'm projecting like an end of life scenario.
That's what it feels like.
Right.
But also it's like, um, did you ever see The Old Guard?
Guard. Yeah, yeah, I did. That's a Charlize Theron
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like
That's a comic book adaptation
yeah,
too.
near immortals protecting
Um,
the stability of the world and stuff.
and then um, Bloodshot. Did you see Bloodshot?
You know what? I did not.
It's not bad. It's not great. It's not great, but it's also not bad. And when you know that they don't have like a huge budget, you're also like, okay, this is pretty good for what it is. And so these mid-level comic book adaptations that don't get huge budgets, but also get A-list at some point, A-list names, if even if they're not A-list right now, and then basically freedom to do um like freedom of control over the outcome, you get these pretty good films. And so that's where there was a rumor that Todd McFarlane was going to do another Spawn, but like he wanted to do a low budget um you know horror flick. So it's shit like that where I feel like comic book adaptations would really start to shine again. Like fucking Neil Gaiman, but did you see Sandman?
Yes, I did.
Like that was really
That
good.
was.
So, and that's where again, there's all these adaptations that are really good quality, but also they're making enough changes from the source material that it makes it worth um just worth watching. Like what was it? I think it was Jupiter Ascending.
So that movie is visually stunning, and the story is hokey as can be, and I enjoy it, but I also know that it's just like
Oh wait, that's that's a good movie, and
it's
that
beautiful, but it's a hokey story. It's Ed the wolf splice dude. What's his name? Oh man.
oh, I was thinking of Jupiter's Legacy.
Okay, that's a completely different story world.
Yeah, yeah. Have you seen Jupiter's Legacy?
Yeah, I have actually. That's like
And
wait, that's the one
it
that's
sucks
kind
it
of like
got canceled.
Incredibles, but or no, Mister. It's like Invincible, but live action.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean it's got it's weird in that it's got the Invincible color scheme, but the bad guy is clearly a Dark Side ripoff. Um, like it's not even subtle. Um, and so it does. There's a lot of derivative aspects of it. Like the costumes clearly just look like one looks like Homelander, and then the other one looks like Omni Man. So it's like, yeah, it doesn't look original on some aspects, but it was well done enough that it's like, oh, you kind of don't really care. And so it sucks that they got canceled in that it could have been um, something akin to The Boys as far as like if they had gotten 4 seasons, I feel like they would have been able to do basically, a live action Invincible. So, which I don't know if we really need a live action Invincible, but if they had, they had already gotten it started. So it's like, it just sucks that we get these half attempts at something new, and then people who are fans of like Infinity War just don't even entertain it because they are addicted to nostalgia. And it's frustrating in that I don't want everything to feel like it's homework. And this is also where the MCU kind of overproduced content to the point where, you know, you have to if you want to know what's going on, you have to watch everything. And it's like after a while it gets to be exhausting. Like I couldn't finish Echo. I really wanted to enjoy it, but it felt like homework, and it didn't allow me to enjoy it in the way I think I would have if Echo wasn't executed at the time that they tried. Like they had just exhausted the good faith with the audience members who wanted something new, but also didn't want some forced shit that didn't really make sense. Where why would they launch Echo before the new Daredevil? Like, you're just setting Echo up to fail when people are primed. They want the new Daredevil, and you're gonna bring him in and fucking cameo and Echo. Why not just do the fucking new Daredevil first? Because then, if you introduce new Daredevil, then Echo's story becomes more relevant. But I don't know who was making the decisions there, and it just was not. People were not prepared for Echo, and so as somebody who like the craziest shit was I feel like they put more money into the CGI for Echo because the stuff I saw was visually stunning, but it was just so tiring to watch. Like I just could not bring myself to care about the character, um, just simply because of the timing. Like we're introduced to the multiverse, and now you're trying to bring me back to the daughter of somebody in the gang who wants to get revenge because her dad got killed, and Kingpin's gang, who now we're coming back to after like 5 years, and oh yeah, that's right, Kingpin. But wait, what happened? And so the convoluted aspect of trying to like go back and forth between multiverse scale stories and street level scale, they just did not execute it well. And so I can't um I can't get upset at the people who didn't support it, in that I think Disney and the MCU took their consuming for granted. But they definitely I think now they're going to start treating every property like it's important and not just filler, where so many of the previous properties, like even She-Hulk, felt like filler in the sense of, even though the joke was about the VFX at the end, if they just would have had a proper budget, they wouldn't have had to make that joke, and it wouldn't have had to feel like this show is just completely a sidetrack joke, just to make this one joke about VFX, and then it doesn't actually, like, they introduced Scar, they introduced the damage control. So they like introduce this stuff to make it feel like, oh, we're moving the plot forward, but they don't do anything with those introductions. It's like, Scar, here he is, cool, right? Here's Scar, but
Okay,
no new
now
Avenger.
what?
Yeah, right. Here we are. Here's Scar at a fucking picnic. Like, wait, what? You're introducing this character, and he's just not gonna say anything, and we're just gonna see him at a picnic. Oh, the VFX budget joke. Okay, I get it. Ha ha ha. And then it's like, well, what just happened to me as a viewer? Like, did they just waste all my time at the expense of trying to make this joke about not having money? And that's what it kind of felt like. And I still enjoyed the show, but that's with the caveat that I know that it didn't add anything to the larger universe. Which, how are you gonna fucking introduce this She-Hulk character? Hasn't been back in the universe since, unless I'm missing something. Um, man, they there's just so many misfires and missteps in the MCU where I didn't. Let me point out, I never was necessarily a huge fan of the first Iron Man film, and it was like I had to watch it maybe 3 or 4 times before I finally was able to stay awake through it because the pacing was so bad. And so I'm I'm aware of the
It was like
time.
three different stories trying to roll three different stories
Yes,
into one, and they didn't have good transitions.
not at all. And but neither did the first Thor film, and neither did the second Thor film. And it wasn't really until the first Avengers that they started to get the formula right. And I'm old enough to remember that people used to call these movies bad before the Avengers came out. And once Avengers came out, it was, oh my God. And then it like retroactively made Iron Man 1 and 2 better. Iron Man 3, I think people still unanimously agree it's like not a good film, but that's also because of what they tried to do with the 10 rings and fucking um like Ben Kingsley as the fake Mandarin, like, and then having another fake Mandarin. So they fucked up basically Iron Man 1, 2, and 3. Replaced fucking Terrence Howard halfway through. Um, that we went from Ed Norton to Mark Ruffalo. There's so much shit that's
Oh no,
wrong with
there was also what was his name? Eric Bana was a Hulk too.
that was pre MCU though, right? That was
That was the Ang Lee
the
Hulk.
James, yeah, Ang Lee.
I
But that's not MCU.
Is it not?
Oh, you know what? Maybe they do count it.
I think it counts.
I think you're right.
He's like he's one of the alt multiverse Hulks out there that like we only got one story of because he had to do some extra crazy shit. That's a really complex Hulk story too. It's definitely way more cerebral than any of the other MCU movies.
Yeah, it says it doesn't line up with the timelines. So it's like it's a multiverse one, but it's not the MCU Hulk.
Yeah, but he's still a Hulk. We can't deny that he was the
Oh no, he's definitely a Hulk. So it's not that he's not part of the greater multiverse, but what that's again where they're just not doing the multiverse right either. It's funny that
they could tap Eric Bana if they wanted to include him.
fuck yeah.
He would
I mean, the same way they brought Wesley back.
Yeah.
Or brought Wesley in. He wasn't MCU, but now he is. So technically now Blade is the longest running MCU character. So he should actually be the anchor being over anybody else, it's like the perfect transition, but it had to like happen through Ryan Reynolds for it to actually be viable as a pathway to getting Wesley as like the anchor, or Wesley's Blade as the anchor being. But in the process, it's like the Mahershala Ali Blade, that never should have even been a thing.
Yeah.
They should have just gone straight into Wesley's Blade, unless it was a multiverse Blade team up, which is cool, but that's not what they're doing. And this is again why they're not doing the multiverse the way they should. It's like if they did Marvel Zombies crossover with Blade, Mahershala Ali crossover with Blade, fucking Wesley Snipes version where they have to kill the MCU universe where everybody's a zombie, suddenly it makes a bunch of fucking sense as to why we got introduced to the zombies in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness. But otherwise, now there's no fucking. They just introduced zombies, and then in What If, nothing, like no connection. But this is Wesley Snipes Blade and Mahershala Ali Blade in the zombie universe is the perfect way to use the multiverse, both of those characters, and to make the multiverse have meaning again instead of just being some fucking stupid MacGuffin that they just pull out when they need to fix a plot hole and create another plot hole with the multiverse again. It's frustrating because they have all of the fucking source material and they have all this chance not to create all these glaring plot holes. But
You know, it's funny if they would just stick with the source material. All they would have to do is show up and build sets and design costumes and program the computers. They don't actually need new writers. They could just go with the actual storyboards that already exist. That's probably asking too much of Disney. Their Imagineers would go on strike.
well, and this is where it's like, obviously, we all know that Disney and the MCU is not paying their artists well, and they're not paying the support that makes these things happen well. And then they turn around and give RDJ $95 fucking million. And it's like, what are we doing? What are we doing here? We're going to have all these unknown artists put under crunch. None of them will get any sort of recognition. RDJ's values just going to go up. And all these people who are going to go watch it and throw money at it don't care about the artist at all. And that's why it's frustrating to me as somebody who got into this genre of media because I was already into the genre of media that they're adapting from. It feels like my passion is being exploited. But then when other people who don't even have that passion for the original source material turn around and create an environment in which the creators are exploited even more and then they don't care, it's like, fuck, I wish we had gatekept comic books more. And it's like, you know, you want to not gatekeep to get people into your shit and help it grow, but then this is the end result where these people who come in and exploit your passion make it worse for everybody, including them, because they don't have any concept of the lower quality, because all they care about is actually the nostalgia that they're addicted to. It's really, I hate nostalgia now. That's like, there are certain things where I have pet peeves of like, this part of society is really annoying. Like intersections where it could be a roundabout. Like that shit really annoys me.
You know, we're going to end up with another Paris Locarno situation where like we're all going to know it's the same actor, but there are going to be people who will deny that like Doom and Stark look the same. Like, no, he doesn't look like anything like Stark. They totally did the makeup really well. You know, he doesn't look like anything like Tony. He's Victor Von Doom, man. He doesn't look anything like Tony Stark. Look at him. The nose is different. I guess it's okay though, because now, you know, Thanos and Cable can exist in the same universe and be played by the same person. And Idris Elba can be, you know, like several characters.
I mean, I thought that had already happened though. I thought,
Yeah. But now they can all be
um,
on screen at the same time.
oh yeah, that's true.
Because at some point, Doom and Iron Man go fisticuffs. Like, how's that gonna work? We're gonna have Tony's face on the screen twice at the same time. They really didn't think this through, did they? They being you know, the
No,
Disney
man.
executives.
No, this is totally a Hail Mary. And like you said, they definitely didn't think about the end of where this is going to be able to go because they put themselves into a corner.
At some point, the entire movie is just going to be Robert Downey Jr. talking to himself.
Like an Eddie Murphy,
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr. playing six roles, fart jokes.
The infinity table.
Where they're eating shawarma and just farting instead of talking. That's how this ends.
Oh man.
I'm surprised Eddie Murphy hasn't shown up actually in the MCU.
Dude, they could have
You
cast
think they
him.
just start mining celebrities at this point?
Yeah, I mean, they could have cast him as Doom and it would have been better.
Oh, bro, why'd you just come up with that amazing fucking casting?
Because it's a good idea.
Oh my God. Jesus Christ, we were all robbed and we didn't know it because Eddie Murphy is when he tried to do the vampire in Brooklyn, I think he was just too popular to actually play like a scary villain. Whereas like now that he's older, been through some shit, and can probably like actually turn on the crazy, like the narcissist that is Victor Von Doom needs to actually be played by somebody who's hilarious, so it can go from like hilarious narcissist to insane evil person that is terrifying because a minute ago they were making jokes. And I don't know if Robert Downey Jr. is that person. He's a great actor. He obviously is Tony Stark. But Tony Stark in the MCU is not evil. He's not the god. He's not the
Man, who would Jim Carrey be
uncaring.
in the MCU?
I mean, I feel like Jim Carrey is a missed opportunity. He could have been Grandmaster.
He could have been. He could be any character.
Um, yeah, I feel like Jim Carrey would have been a better High Evolutionary
Yeah.
than the guy that played him. Like, not nothing against his performance, but um, yeah, James Gunn just like has these people, one of whom is his wife, where it's like, I get it, like, yeah, you want to put your wife in everything, but like, dude, this is starting to feel like it's hard to see these people as the character because you keep using the same people over and over. And so I keep seeing like, oh, this is James Gunn's wife. And I can't see the character. And it started with Peacemaker. Um and it's gonna backfire, man.
You
It's
know,
like
back in the '80s, like I don't know if he still does it. Roger Corman, he made a bunch of B movies where they just recycled the same actors in every
mhm.
movie, and so after a while, like it felt like these movies were all in the same universe because the character actors were really had like one or two characters, and eventually those characters got blended into one character. Is that what's happening to Disney now? Are they like just consuming themselves? Is this a sign of things to come? Scarlett Johansson's going to be cast as. Oh, it would be great if she was cast as Viper. Because then she could be in charge of Hydra and be hunted by the Red Room at the same time. She could be hunting herself and be hunted by Red Room.
I mean, I don't think that's out of line with where things are headed.
I mean, if
considering they brought back Chris Evans as Johnny Storm.
Yeah. That was so good.
Yeah. And it's like,
oh,
it can work. It can totally work. I mean, they already brought back Kelsey Grammer as Beast too. But it's like,
I think Channing Tatum's Gambit was just marvelous. He was so good as Gambit. I couldn't understand anything he said. It was amazing.
I think it seems like we might get a movie with him as Gambit that's like more focused on it, but we'll see like if the executives actually listen for once.
Yeah.
But Ryan Reynolds seems to be doing what The Rock wanted to do at DC, but he's actually being successful because he's not making it all about him.
Yeah. And he's focusing on characters that everyone wants to see. It's like he's really smart and is in tune with like Marvel comic fans.
Well, and sometimes I feel like they're just using these movies to launder money because it's like I didn't see Deadpool and Wolverine in the theater, but that shit still managed to make $1.5 billion going on $2 billion. Where I'm like,
oh, it's got the Spider-Man effect.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, I didn't see Spider-Man in the fucking theaters either. That shit still made like $2 billion damn near, or I think it made crossed it, but it's like, who are these people going to see it like 4 and 5 times in the theater that aren't dying from COVID?
How many movie theaters are there? We already looked this up at one point.
And they're like less than 5,000.
2,278.
Yeah. Yeah, damn.
In 1995, there were 7,744.
What? Yeah, in 2019 there was 5,500. So the movie industry has definitely taken a COVID hit.
Oh wow! So in 2022, there were 39,000 movie screens.
Yeah,
that's a lot of screens, but
not divided by hundreds of millions of people.
No, not at all. And in 2019 there were 5,500 movie theaters, actual like the whole ass theater, and here we are like only 5 years later, and there are half that number of actual theaters. Not that's not counting the number of screens, because some screens are in like cineplexes that have 12 screens or more, if they're even more psychotic. I can't imagine like a super cineplex that has like 20 screens exists anymore, but maybe they do.
Well, it's like Indianapolis had a IMAX. I don't know if they still have that IMAX.
So the Canopolis Madrid Megaplex in Spain has 25 screens, and has a seating capacity of 9,200 people and one 996 seat auditorium. That's just obscene to me. Like 25 screens, 90, almost 10,000 people can squeeze into that place.
Well, I mean, they are basically just mock stadiums.
Yeah. I bet it was a stadium at one point.
Yeah. Because I remember whenever I went to IMAX, it just totally felt like, the stadium seating in full effect. It definitely felt like a lot more people than a regular movie theater. And these like mega theaters are like obviously not as prevalent, but then yeah, they can pack way more um people into one viewing.
It's actually a really cool looking building. Shaped like a dog bone. Or an airport. It actually has quite a bit in common with airport. And is huge. Like, just gigantic huge. The auditorium is really cool looking too. Man, what a weird looking. No, it's all really cool. It's all very, very cool looking. Like the kind of place that you definitely get lost trying to find your seat. Gotta follow the right concourse to get to your theater.
Well, yeah, I think, there must have been 5 or 6 entrances. So it is like, yeah, um, you really can get lost in one of those pretty easily. Or like, if the lights are off.
There's still nothing about that makes me want to go hang out with, like, I don't know what's times at 25 going to almost 10,000. I don't want to hang out with that many people to watch a movie. Like there's nothing that on earth that would ever make, I guess, a huge, like, exorbitant sum of money would make me want to go hang out and watch a movie with that many people.
Right.
Someone would have to give me a ton, like a whole ton of like $50 bills. That's my price. 1 ton of $50 bills. I'll make, and hundreds if it's on a major holiday. That's how much it would cost to get me to go to a giant theater to hang out with that many people to watch a movie.
Man, it's so funny in terms of it's been years since I've been to a movie theater and I don't feel like anything is missing out of my life. I really don't feel as if my life is lacking because I'm not doing
It
that
was 2019.
group experience anymore.
2019 was the last time I went to a theaters. Captain Marvel.
I think that was the same one for me. I think Prometheus before that.
Yeah, I saw Prometheus in a theater. And Covenant. But Captain Marvel.
Oh, Prometheus was 2012. Jesus Christ, that was way before that.
It was probably Covenant that you saw.
Oh yeah, it's probably Covenant. I'm thinking of. Yeah.
I saw Covenant in the theaters. I thought it was great. Captain Marvel is the actual last movie I ever saw in a theater, though. And really, there hasn't been anything that makes me want to go back into a theater. Like, nothing yet. James Cameron's going to have to reinvent cinema again. For me to want to go back into a giant theater and watch a movie with a bunch of people that I don't know.
Yeah, because then have you seen Foundation?
Yeah,
Which it's like I feel like if they had released that in the theater, I might be at least inclined to think about it, and I wouldn't do it, but I'd be like, oh, that'd be really cool on the big screen. But it came out on the small screen, so that's where.
yeah. I mean, for that to work, it would have to be a special package where you pay like $80. They provide you with like two meals, unlimited popcorn and beverage, and there are like rest breaks where everyone has to stop, like intermissions where everyone has to stop and go walk around. Like that's the only way to do it because they made that whole mini series too long for like to condense into one movie. Also, the story is too complex to condense to one movie.
I don't think I feel like I know they did intermissions for Titanic, but I think they did intermissions for Infinity War, right?
I think so.
In some viewings.
I think that there were also intermissions for Dune.
Yeah, I think you're right.
So I mean, the intermission is not even a lost concept. It's actually a really good thing. I wish more movies had intermissions baked into them.
Hmm.
Whereas, like, it's like a courtesy when the storytellers acknowledge, like, hey, this is a really long story. We know it's complicated. We know you're into this, but we also acknowledge that bladders are only so damn big. Especially if it's like a movie that has like action sequence followed by calm, followed by action sequence, followed by calm. All that like, you know, constricting of the bladder and then letting it relax and then tightening them up and relaxing. Over time, that takes its toll. And we're not all teenagers anymore. Not everyone can handle that kind of rapid transit. That's actually one of the things that I don't like about the roller coaster thing is that some roller coaster movies, like, I feel like I've been doing like ab crunches the whole time. And a lot of that comes in like the form of like just visceral storytelling. It's just like the shock, big sound, big flash on screen, some kind of jump cut that makes me jump.
So it turns out Titanic was not released with an official intermission, and so any theater that did it on their own.
Oh, that was really nice of everyone who did that.
Yeah. Apparently, Gandhi was the last film in 1982 that was released with an official intermission.
Huh.
Um, but again, that's what I'm like. I could have sworn that. I mean, I didn't. I don't think I saw Infinity War in the theater. I remember seen it so many times at this point.
I Well, if it came out after Captain Marvel, then I didn't see it in the theater.
I guess. Yeah.
Nope, it came out a year before Captain Marvel, so there's a strong possibility that I saw that in the theater.
Oh, I guess. I guess some theaters added intermissions for Endgame. That's what happened. There was no official intermission. That's crazy. Oh, you know what though? They I know why. Because these fucking assholes were trying to get it on as many screens as possible. And it's like um six I don't know how many. Um, it, if you had so many intermissions, it would prevent an entire viewing because it would like push the next slot out of the time that the theater was open. So it's like not adding intermissions allowed them to put the movie on more viewings per day. And that's one of the issues that like why movies started going from
I wonder if
120 minutes to 90 minutes.
I wonder if Zack Snyder's Justice League had an intermission. It seems like a candidate.
Oh, but it went straight to fucking
Oh, straight
HBO.
to
Yeah. Like I don't even know if they did a theatrical.
Then we can just pause it whenever we want. That's not the same.
Yeah.
It's actually really nice when a movie says, "Hey, we're gonna take a break. Internet, please hear me while I say this and channel this information to the ears that need to hear it." And not a commercial break either.
No, there was no. I think some fans screened it, but there was no official theatrical release of the Snyder Cut.
Hmm.
Well, and it's funny, like, as someone who enjoyed the Snyder Cut and wanted it to happen, in retrospect, that was probably one of the biggest mistakes ever.
I mean, despite being visually superior,
well, it don't matter how visually superior it was. It encouraged his cult.
4 fucking hours.
His cult is like one of the worst things to ever happen.
4 hours. It shouldn't take 4 hours to tell a story in a movie. 3 hours max. At the 4 hour mark, I'd actually rather it be chopped up and delivered as a miniseries.
Right. Well, that's kind of how it was paced anyway. So it could have just been
It would have been
3
better
episodes.
Could have been better on TV. They could have given us 8 30-minute episodes, and it would have been anticipation galore. And in that context, the CGI would have actually made sense.
But at the same time, it's like if you put it into one film, then you don't have to have 9 acts.
But it already had 9 acts.
I mean, technically, but you don't have to if it's in one film. And so
it shouldn't have 9 acts.
Right. And so I think that's where like the way he broke it up into chapters, like, yeah, those should have just been the episodes and it should have just been a miniseries instead of a feature film. But people have these ideas of like, oh, I want to revolutionize film. Well, you just made a miniseries.
We're gonna. I bet in like 10 years, there's gonna be the Zack Snyder extra cut of Justice League, and it's gonna be a whole 10 hours.
Oh God.
I wouldn't be surprised at this point if that was the outcome. There's an entire like double length movie just that got cut because it was just too long. They made too much. They're like, we got this incredible budget, guys. How ambitious can we be? Like, well, if we detune the CGI and cut back on the dialogue and use a lot of really dramatic and slow panning of the camera, we can probably stretch this thing out to 16 hours. And you'd think they'd have learned their lesson from Lord of the Rings.
Well, and this is kind of where Zack Snyder, when you see enough of his films, the dependence upon slow-mo sequences is a huge crutch. And you take away slow-mo scenes from Zack Snyder, Ooh, he's very, very hollow. Um, he uses slow mo to make his cinematography seem more meaningful than it actually is. And so when you see it through that lens, then it's really hard to like actually want anybody to give Zack Snyder any more money. Um, like his like knowing why he had to step away from Justice League in the first place, like I feel like he should have just retired. Um, and then knowing after he completed the Snyder cut how much he encouraged the Snyder cult and leaned into it, that's where I'm like, I can't in good conscience like pay Zack Snyder any attention. And part of it is like, if he hadn't made Sucker Punch, I wouldn't be as inclined to write him off. But Sucker Punch is like already questionable. But then on top of someone who has like chosen their work over their family, lost a family member because of that, and then decided to go back and get completely immersed in work, that there are some emotional problems that come off as a workaholic where he's not socially adjusted. And so that's the type of like I hate seeing that behavior because if it was in a movie, he'd be a fucking villain. You know,
I
like the guy that
I
neglects his.
I don't think that I can really. I don't know, man. Rebel Moon was such a poor ripoff of Seven Samurai. Like that, I think that's his last contribution. They were supposed, and that was supposed to be like his version of a Star Wars movie. And instead of contributing to the Star Wars universe, which isn't impossible, he just remade Seven Samurai and did a. I don't know. It's a really pretty movie, but beyond that, that's it. Like a. And it took two whole movies to do it. Like Magnificent Seven only took one movie to remake itself, which is an adaptation, of course. Nobody liked what he did with Man of Steel. Dawn of Justice is hard to watch.
Well, did you see the longer cut of Man of Steel?
Probably.
I think that's the one because it has more. Oh wait, that's
Or are you talking about Dawn of Justice?
I think.
Dawn of Justice is the one where he and Batman go to town and have to deal with Doomsday, but Man of Steel is the one
Well,
where
both of them have cut scenes where in Dawn of Justice, the cut scene is like more background on the U.S. Army fucking up, and then basically exposing Jimmy Olsen and Lois. Well, they're supposed to be undercover, and then the military fucks up, gets Olsen killed, and then that's when Superman swoops in and saves Lois and kills that dude in the process. And then the plot makes way more sense when you see the military fucked up. But what happened was the military didn't want to look bad, so I think they had him take out that part of the film. So it's like there's a deal in Hollywood that if you want to use military equipment in your movie, they have to get a view of the script before it's finalized. And so I think this is one of the cases, and the same shit happened with Transformers, where it's like, yeah, if you want to use any of their equipment, you can't make them look bad. And so that little cut made the film not make sense as much. And then when you see that clip, it's like, oh shit, this could have been a completely different film. Um, but also it's like, well, that's what happens when you fuck around and make deals with the US government. Your shit comes out compromised. And you're no better than Michael Bay as a director.
Yeah, it was
So
definitely all Bayhem.
Bayhem.
How many cuts can we get into this sequence? 45? I need double that.
Well, it's
Yeah,
kind of the same shit with Polyphia in that on the one hand, yeah, it can be super technical, and then how many cuts can you jam in 2 minutes? And they're like 315. And it's like, well, it can be technically astounding while also being painful to actually
yeah.
consume.
BT was entered into the Guinness Book of World Records for his song Somnambulist, recognized as using the largest number of vocal edits in a song with 6,178 edits. How like maddening would it be to go through and edit something 6,100, almost 6,200 times, just one vocal. Yeah, there's definitely a point where like the technical aspect of something is probably the only really interesting thing about it. Like there's a lot of electronic music like that, where the only thing that's really fascinating is because it's leveraging some really obscure technology that only like five people on Earth know how to actually use. And then they got it to do something that nobody else has ever imagined it could do. Or it's the guy who's got a whole ass modular rig that takes an entire semi to move and 12 hours to set up, and then the entire show is watching them plug little patch cords into, modules into other modules, and occasionally turning a knob and occasionally pressing a button and rocking real hard the whole time. But it's almost all like it's just patch based basically. Just I'm gonna operate the telephone switchboard here and make music. I think on some level that's why I still enjoy, like, something like Polyphia, where it's like, wow, that's like watching gymnasts or acrobats.
Well, and on that note, it's like I do enjoy the complexity of what it takes to pull off a Michael Bay sequence, like how they have to build
Everything.
hydraulic fucking catapults to make cars look like they're flying off, shit like that, where the mix of practical effects with VFX is impressive, but that's only one part of what makes a great film, where you know great cinematography does not a great film make. And that, I feel like that's the Zack Snyder issue ultimately, because 300's a great film,
300 is fantastic.
but it's an adaptation.
But it started with really, really, really good source material.
Yeah, and Sucker Punch is not a great film. It's also an adaptation, and so that's where
It's just visually very compelling. Like, it's got a very interesting look to it. The aesthetic is well executed. The story is
Mhm.
crap. Soundtrack's okay though.
Well, and this would be like, okay, Eon Flux live action, for example. Um, I think when it first came out, it came out at a time where we were so inundated with media that it felt like, oh, this is a bad adaptation, and they could have done better. But going back and watching it, the worst parts about it really is like the dated music, which can be changed, and I think that's really the worst part. So I think a lot of the shit that um did you ever see like the Riddick Chronicles?
I did, and I actually enjoy them.
Yeah, and so they did not do well when they first came out, but I feel like if they came out now, knowing how bad media can get, they would do way better, even if it's the exact same film. Like, and it's the same shit with Eon Flux. I feel like if they just took Eon Flux, rescored it, and re-released it with no actual edits to the film, or not even changing the CGI, or like I think they did a lot of practical, so it's like it wouldn't even really be CGI. So it's like that film could get released today and do way better than it did when it originally got released, because there's been way worse shit that's come out since then, and that's where I'm like, I I know for a fact that if an actor pulls off a great performance, it makes me reassess their previous performances. And one of the best examples is fucking Alan Richson, where his Jack Reacher, suddenly I knew his Hank in Titans was good, but now suddenly it's like, oh no, that was like an award-winning performance. We just didn't know at the time that it was an award-winning performance because we hadn't seen enough bad performances to compare it to. And so um there's that, and then he was in like one of the Turtles reboots as a voice actor as Raphael. Um and then in fucking Smallville. It's like, if you don't know Alan Richson, because we didn't know him at the time because he hadn't had a chance to actually probably develop his identity fully off screen, and then to know how much of himself he's including in the on-screen character. Um what was it? That football player, Thad um Castle.
I don't know.
Yeah, Thad Castle in Blue Mountain State. So he played fucking in this. It was like a comedy called Blue Mountain State. He plays this character called Thad Castle, and it's basically like Hank from Titans with more jokes and with less like dramatic background. So you start to see his range is based around him being at the basis of these characters and just doing more exaggerated versions of his um comedy, or more exaggerated versions of his like identifying with social issues, because he'll be like, oh, that's what it was. He one time he posted on Facebook, and he was wearing like a t-shirt that said arrest the cops that killed Breonna Taylor. And that's when all of the people who thought he was like a right-wing person slash Reacher was a right-wing character, they were like, oh, I didn't know you were woke. Fuck you. You know, Reacher's woke. I'm gonna boycott it. And that was like the point when all these people who thought Reacher was like a revenge porn character either stepped away or started to reassess their understanding. But it was, to me at that point, that I realized, like, oh, some people believe in social justice and then they'll play characters that are heroes or are superheroes that believe in social justice, and that part of them aligns with their characters. But sometimes people will pretend to be those characters and not have those beliefs in real life, and exploit the fact that those characters exemplify certain beliefs to sell it to the audience. Like, I feel like Robert Downey Jr. does this, because then he doesn't really come out and have any social justice stances where it's like, you don't have to do that, but you also then shouldn't be held up as like this hero by society that then wants to detach politics from their heroes because of people like him. And it's like, I don't necessarily want every actor or every actress having a politically outspoken stance. But the issue becomes when somebody ascends to the level of Robert Downey Jr. and he doesn't speak out on behalf of artists or writers. Well, suddenly now he's making $95 million and the artists and writers aren't getting better deals because he didn't use his influence to help them out. And now it's like not as easy to support him because he's not supporting the people that have made him who he is now. Because before the Disney writers and before the Disney makeup artists and before the Disney VFX, he was at the bottom of Hollywood. He was down to D-list, if not F-list, because of his drug habits, because of his jail time, because of I don't think he was necessarily identified as a diva so much as his drug habits and alcohol habits would mean he wouldn't show up on time, or he might show up to the set smelling like alcohol. So there were these problems. Robert Downey Jr. was a problem child in Hollywood. And so that's why when he did Iron Man, fucking Terrence Howard got paid more to play Rhodey than RDJ got paid to play fucking Tony Stark. And so knowing that Robert Downey Jr. doesn't turn around and say, oh, okay, I'm going to negotiate this $95 million contract and turn around and give $45 million to the people working on the fucking movie, still have $40 million left over, and look like shit. You don't do $20 million, do $5 million.
It's funny.
It don't have to even be half. It don't have to be half.
He could pull like, basically
a Keanu Reeves.
Yeah, pull a Keanu, and then nearly everything would be forgiven about the Doom thing.
And it's easy to, bro, if Keanu Reeves hadn't foregone his entire check and paid the goddamn people who worked on the fucking movie for the fucking Matrix, we wouldn't even be able to make that comparison.
Yeah.
But no, we have actual people who play heroes, who do heroic shit in real life, so we don't have to like justify their poor behavior.
We don't have to fantasize about like that kind of
right.
the kind
Which
of
again, that's where it's like, man, you want to believe in this idea that these people create, which is why I think it is like every time Keanu plays a hero, he goes into the real world and does things to then make you, if you're not going to look at him as heroic, at least he's not a shitty person. So it's like, at least just don't be shitty. So
man, it's such a low bar.
Right. Because then you look at people like The Rock, where you can tell he tries not to be a shitty person, but he has too many yes men surrounding him to not know when he's making a good decision or not, because people aren't being honest with him. That's completely different Whereas RDJ, it's like I heard some of the Joe Rogan interview, and he definitely has people. He RDJ has clearly surrounded himself by people who he wanted to get validated from, who live detached in these ivory towers, and he's allowed them to blow smoke up his ass, and now he believes it, and he's no longer the same RDJ that thought about the Burger King incidents where he would like be all fucking drunk and go get a Whopper from Burger King. Like, he's detached from that RDJ, and I don't know if any of his friends are willing. Like, I don't know if he has a friend that's old enough, not from wealth, and honest with him enough to tell him that, which is why it seems like he's drifting further and further into this ivory tower syndrome. And it's sad to see in that he could have been like a down to earth, I've seen it all, I've been to the top, and that's what keeps my feet on the ground type person. But no, he's drifting into like being Tony Stark, and I feel like he's forgotten Tony Stark's an asshole.
or he knows Tony Stark's an asshole and really
doesn't care
and really enjoyed pretending to be Tony Stark and wants to bring that part of himself out of the silver screen and into the real world.
That's what it feels like. But again,
I mean, if he embraces Doom, I mean,
that's the lesson you learn when you don't do the demon in a bottle plot line correctly. This is exactly what happens when you fucking clean up the demon in a bottle plot line and don't examine the full range of why this character is not perfect, and examine the faults, and you gloss over it and you show a little bit of that, but then he gets redemption in the same arc in the same film, and so we never really see an unredeemed Tony Stark. We never, like, Tony Stark never pays for his womanizing. That nigga should have had herpes, something, the clap, something, and he comes up with a way to fucking, use nanobots to clear it up, and it's a joke. But he literally never gets any repercussions from his womanizing, except a woman who is now scorned and wants to get revenge on him. That is and now she's the bad guy. Because he was fucking a bunch of women and not knowing who he was putting his dick in. Now she's the bad guy? No, that's the wrong fucking message, bro. It's like crazy that it takes this long for someone to like point out that Tony Stark never had any real repercussions for his womanizing, in that with Batman, at least we know he ends up alone. That's the repercussion. He never is able to emotionally connect with a woman because he has spent too much time womanizing, and now he's at a point where he's so broken that he can never make a meaningful connection to someone who doesn't know he's Batman, who thinks he's this Bruce Wayne rich person, and then if they think he's Batman, then he can't create a meaningful relationship as Bruce Wayne. That's the repercussion. We know that. So there are things where we see the detrimental effects of Bruce Wayne's inability to establish meaningful relationships outside of sex, outside of money, and outside of crime fighting, which is why his relationship with Selena Kyle is always fucked up. It's never good. And so those things aren't in question. But then when we get this version of Tony Stark who ends up marrying Pepper, who ends up with the woman he's scorned, with one of the many women he's scorned as the bad guy, and no other, like, no kid, I guess he has a kid that he's the father to. He should have had an estranged kid that he didn't know he was the father of as at least a villain, because that's been a plot in
I was gonna say, isn't that's like one of the nanite plots?
I mean, but it's been one of the plots in one of the films of I can't think of which film it was off the top of my head, but I know at least one Marvel film has done it. I think a DCU film has done it too. Is it Aquaman I'm thinking of? Regardless, that would have been a way better way to approach his past, give him repercussions, and also make it so that he can still be a hero that's imperfect, not being presented to the audience as like this watered down version that then it's almost difficult to identify the proper lessons that one should be learning from it. Because main thing being, dude's a fucking billionaire. We're not supposed to identify with him. You know what I'm saying? Like we're none of the people watching fucking Iron Man are billionaires. So like the one billionaire that's watching it ends up in it. Fucking Elon buys his way into Iron Man 2. So it's like that fucking weirdo, he's not watching it with the same ideas as us. He's like, oh, let me buy my way into this film. And then he does. So we can't, as non-rich, poor people watching Iron Man, we're not supposed to fucking try to identify with Iron Man at all. Not at all.
You know, the irony of Elon appearing at the big Stark Expo is that none of Elon's technologies even compared to like the rejects, like Hammer's reject pile.
Right, yeah.
Like Elon would never be tapped for aim. His trucks catch on fire when they get wet. Like that's the reality of that whole universe, is that our best real tech billionaire who's actually doing some really interesting but dumb things also, like he doesn't even actually get out of the shadow of Tony Stark. He doesn't get out of the shadow of Hammer. AIM would have passed him over long ago.
And this is also why it's even more difficult to find the real. Oh my God. I feel dumber that I have to say that Iron Man is meant to be Tony Stark's apology to humanity for making a bunch of money off of weapons of destruction that only contributed to negative outcomes. And so this is where AIM and fucking Hammer, like, they don't have any qualms about what they're doing. That's why they're supposed to be bad guys. Tony's at least supposed to look like he feels bad for it, but it gets so lost in his witty quips and his fucking personality that it's almost like we forget as the audience what happened in Iron Man 1, that like, also those terrorists are supposed to be right. Those, in terms of like the way they're presented as the bad guys, but they're fucking right. They're correct. Tony Stark is a pox upon humanity, and he understands that after he fucking tricks his way out of there, which is why he becomes a good guy. When they end up being the bad guys in Iron Man 1, and like I understand the need for the framework of how he becomes Iron Man, but the way to execute it Now you got a bunch of people don't realize Tony Stark was wrong. And they have that when he's like showing his new weapons hitting the mountain and he's like lifting his arms and
Oh yeah, it looks like wings, angel wings behind him.
right. And everybody's like, "Oh, that's so cool!" Like, no, that's his most evil moment in the entire MCU. Right there is before Tony Stark has grown a conscience, and so the fact that the people who watched, most of the people who watched that film, didn't get any of that, and they came away, Tony Stark's so cool, because Tony Stark didn't used to be a household like hero. He was B team. Avengers were B team. Iron Man was like, he got a TV show, but he was definitely behind Spider-Man in as far as popularity goes before RDJ came and embodied him and made this charismatic person that everyone likes. We're not supposed to like him. His own teammates don't even really like him. They tolerate him. And so when you have an audience that is so media illiterate that they come away romanticizing Tony Stark, and by proxy, now Tony Stark has to become the anchor of the MCU and the heart of the MCU to the point that they can't let go of RDJ. And they got to bring him back as Doctor Doom. None of the points that were in the source material got across to this audience, and they learned all the wrong lessons. And that's once again where I'm like looking at the trajectory of it. And as a comic book fan, this is one of the best things that could have ever happened, where I wish it would have happened before I was born and I could have just grown up with this shit, this media. But then on the other hand, I probably would have turned out dumber if that was the case, because it would have been like occluding the real stories that they're then watering down and turning into these bite-sized, simplified shadows of the original stories, where I was explaining to Yasi about like why Flashpoint was so revolutionary, and then I realized, like, oh my God, all this heavy air quotes sci-fi media has abused the multiverse trope so much that now Flashpoint doesn't even seem like a big deal. When in reality, when that storyline first appeared in the comic books, that is changing the trajectory of science, it's changing the trajectory of everything, to the point that it changed the trajectory of science fiction media. And so now that we have a bunch of copycat multiverse stories, anytime someone tries to do an adaptation of one of the originals, it looks just hacky and like a trope. And even like MCU, when they do multiverse, it's really hard to keep continuity through the multiverse, let alone when you're trying to incorporate franchise capital exploitation in the process. And now they have something that makes no fucking sense. The audience hates it. They want to go back away from it, but it's because they tried to monetize this idea to the point that all of the iterations that we end up not having a grounding in some sort of story that's desired to actually be told. In that Secret Wars, there's clearly a fucking story. Like, the Secret Wars has such a great impact on the greater Marvel universe that I'm glad that they're able to do it with the X-Men and Spider-Man now, and incorporate the IP that got sold off. But as you said, it's out of order now. It was supposed to happen before the Infinity Saga. There's certain things that are supposed to happen. So now it makes us feel like we're probably going to be back at the Infinity Saga in like 6 or 7 years. And it's because they painted themselves in a corner with this multiverse trajectory, trying to make it about money instead of the story. And people like us can see it. And so I think that's where it does then become we're looking at what someone attempted to be like the Tim Henson of filmmaking and just ended up being a mess. Like they did not create the order out of the chaos and out of the structure that could have emerged into something that is hyper technically nuanced and has all of the techniques and all of the tools implemented to make something that makes sense. Whereas they tried to do too much with the multiverse, with you know, all of the different universes, bringing in the Fox, the Sony, the Universal, tried to incorporate it all, and then tried to make it about, well, how can we make the best profit off of this, and instead of focusing on how do we make the best story out of this? Because ironically, there's some, I mean, I don't really believe in multiverse the way it's been presented, but if the multiverse existed the way these fucking assholes have made it seem like, then somebody made a version of the MCU that was focused on the quality and not the money. But I don't think the universe is that subject to human decisions in the same way that a lot of these multiverses, the Rick and Morty multiverse, the most really abuses that concept of like an indecisive person creating alternate universes where every time someone makes a choice and or has a choice and they don't make it, it creates another universe. And it's like, yeah, if the universe were centered around humans, that would make sense. But the universe existed for billions of years before humans were even remotely in the line for evolution. So that's why those types of frameworks don't really, if it's for the service of a storyline, that's fine. But then when these stories end up becoming ubiquitous with scientific theories and scientific frameworks, and then people will use Back to the Future or Infinity Wars as their basis from which they're trying to enter actual science, then it becomes incumbent upon these creators not to use useless MacGuffins when they're discussing physics or discussing astrophysics, because they could go the Star Trek route and bring in specialists so it's at least anchored in some sort of reality instead of just making it up.
No, they couldn't. They wouldn't. They wouldn't bring themselves to do that. There's no world where Disney hires anyone that qualified to inject any kind of scientific reality. It just doesn't happen. It's Marvel Universe. They can't actually have science. Like, imagine if there was a scientific consultant for anything that Fantastic Four.
And see, I'm fine with that.
I'd love to see it, but I don't think it could have happened.
At least do some continuity, though.
Yeah,
because then that's where it's like, if you have everything MacGuffin and no continuity, then it starts to lose meaning altogether. And it's like, the decisions become purely about what is going to make the most money, and then that comes across on screen, and it's hard to become immersed in the actual media, because you're like, oh, they're just trying to sell me a toy or trying to sell me some fucking meal at Pizza Hut that they made a deal with, and now Sylvie's doing some shit at Sylvie's got a job at McDonald's now. Wait, what? Why? Why does Sylvie have a job at McDonald's? Oh, because they have a Loki marketing promo going on. Wait, what the fuck does that have to do with the plot? Nothing. But marketing thought it would be great. And now you have a character in season 2 of Loki, or was it season 1? Whatever.
Season 2.
Yeah, season 2 of Loki that works at fucking McDonald's, even though she's supposed to be a god of mischief.
Yeah. Well,
That's exhausting. Like the fact that I had to construct that sentence. Like it's shit like that where I'm like, man, capitalism promised the best and they promised that it would improve creativity, but now you have McDonald's in this fucking story where there's no reason for this to be there except for the fact that they're trying to sell the fucking Loki green shake or whatever.
oh man, it's totally cool. Like they totally injected like, McDonald's into Back to the Future. So, time travel is okay with McDonald's. And Pepsi. I'm not sure if it's even possible to have media anymore that isn't a commercial. I was
Thanks, Steven Spielberg.
Yeah,
it was all Spielberg's fault.
And George Lucas.
Oh yeah, that's true.
But like, I was watching a guitar player on YouTube. It was supposed to be some kind of live stream performance thing, and almost all of the camera work was like doing these long passing shots over their pedal board and over their amps, but like not the kind of thing where it was intended so you could see their settings. It was so you could just see the amp or see the pedal or see the guitar, but not what they were playing. You could see the microphone, but not them singing. And the whole time just felt like a really complex commercial with music that I thought I was interested in until it started being a commercial the whole time.
Well, and you hit on something. Sweeping shots are not a style, but you have pieces of media that are like all sweeping shots because these people aren't trained in production and they're not trained in visual aesthetic culture or anything whether it's moving image or still image. And so they have no actual composition, and it's like they have a fucking 4K camera and a drone and they can make these sweeping shots, but they don't know how to compose a shot. They don't know how to compose the background, the midground, or the foreground. And so I'm seeing a lot of like uncomposed sweeping shots that people think is a style, and especially when it's like AI generated stuff. And I think a lot of it comes back to Zack Snyder
and Michael Bay.
And yes, Michael Bay.
We're not letting Michael Bay off easy on this here. He invented Bayhem.
But his sweeping shots are fast.
That's true.
Versus the Snyder slow. And so at least and you'll see with the people who are trying to do the Bay, they use a lot of drone fly-throughs. That's not a style either. It's a tool, but that's not a style. And I think there's like all these people producing media that have undeveloped styles, only leaning on individual tools. But that's the kind of construction I can come up with because I know like the history of the pan and zoom or sweeping shot. And like, I understood fucking Orson Welles and like RKO, that studio that made Citizen Kane. It's like now we had to watch Citizen Kane in film class, but now people would never be able to sit through it because of attention spans. And it's like, this is the same thing. You can appreciate technique and not love something. You don't have to love it to appreciate technique.
Yeah, you got to want to sit through Citizen Kane, probably because you're getting graded on it later. That's a really that's a commitment. I think that's one of those things that's part of the reason they fudged the multiverse so much, because they're like, oh, we don't have to commit to anything. We can just change things, do whatever we want. Bring back RDJ as Doom.